Hi, everyone. This is Melanie Smith at Solo Select. We're here on a very exciting episode today talking a little bit about Shotty, LBR Hangem. This is the horse that you guys have seen on our social media lately and hopefully on all the social media. Kenny and him have just lit up the arena. They won the Super Stakes the other day with the 228. We were really excited. That was Shotty's first title at Fort Worth by himself. He had split the title once last year at the Summer Spectacular, and I think Kenny was so close he could taste it last time, and we were happy to share it with who we shared it with last year for sure, but we were really excited he kind of got to be on his own stage this year. And so that got him over 400,000 and also gave him 2 titles in Fort Worth. So he could have done one or the other. Either one would have got him into the NCHA Hall of Fame. And so we were very excited about that. Ty has always had a goal of owning a horse that went into the Hall of Fame. We've got several horses that are Hall of Famers, world champions, horse of the years out here in the stud barn. And we're really grateful to have them, but it definitely is even more exciting whenever you get to own them while they're in that part of their career. And so today we're just going to talk a little bit about LBR Hangem and how he came into Ty and I's lives and then came into Todd's life. And it all kind of started here with Dawn. And, I'm going to let him kick this off because I think it all really started with Dual Rayish in the very beginning.
It did. I helped Billy Wolf find Dual Rayish. And so whenever we started standing, Austin was still showing him. So we just bred a small group of mares the first year. But it kind of goes back to even Highbrow CD days. I had a customer that, and a good friend, Chris Thibodeau, that bought Highbrow CD, and he didn't have a lot of mares. So whenever he acquired that stud, he wanted to get more mares to breed to him, obviously. So Austin had rode the first colt out of a Hangem High Pep, which is Shotty's mama. There's a horse called Time to Hangem, and that was by One Time Pepto. And so he really liked that horse. So he told Chris about the mare. So they partnered on the mare. So the majority of her colts have been by Highbrow CD over the years. And then whenever Chris had sold Highbrow CD, they were, dissolving their partnership on some mares and stuff they had. So I got a good customer of mine to buy her. I thought she was a wonderful mare. And I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you about this really, really good mare, but one of these days I want an embryo out of her. And I said, I don't know when it'll be, but one of these days I want an embryo out of her. And he said, okay, deal. And of course, in the horse business, a lot of it's just a handshake deal. And, especially with me. So, years later, Dual Rayish came along, did great, won the futurity. So Billy had given me an embryo or a breeding to Dual Rayish. So I knew what mare I wanted to breeding to. Just her conformation. She's big, tall, withered. This mare had some things that I thought would help him, and I thought he had some things that would help her, just from a conformational standpoint. And the other thing is that if she didn't have any cat in her, no little Lena in her, so I kind of had a plan from that standpoint of an outcross if it works. And for years, we've been trying to find an outcross, but we tried a little bit of everything, race horses. And first and foremost, you got to find something that's a unique individual that from an athletic standpoint, and that can go win. And so far, that's been hard to do because of, the cat influence in the cutters. So anyway, I had that in mind. And so I called up Mr. Burt Charles and I said, hey, you remember when I found you that mare? And fortunately, he remembered our conversation, and he said, yep, sure do. And he said, just get my embryo first, and then you think you can get yours. So that's what we did. And as luck would have it, the recent mare that was carrying his colt that year lost it. So I was the only one got one that year. And he reminded me of that several times. So anyway, I talked to Charles almost daily. So when it came time to starting, he had called me, and I had him on the trailer, and he just asked me what I was doing and whatever. And I told him I was going to take that colt out of a little Hangem to colt starter. And he said, well, you're the only one who got one that year. And I said, yeah, I remember. I said, but today's the day, your lucky day. He said, what's that? And I said, I'm going to sell you half this colt. So anyway, he said, well, what's he look like? I said, well, he looks great. And he said, well, how's he move? I said, he moves great. And he said, well, what, now it's, the $1 million question, what do you want for half of them? I said, I don't want you to pay me anything. That's what you pay all the training. So that was our deal. And we didn't have anything in writing, just, just a gentleman's agreement. And that's hard to do these days. And as y'all all know, every good attorney would say, get everything in writing. But with Charles, it was never that way. I mean, from the time he bought the mare, a lot of times people forget what they tell you, but he didn't. But it was 4 or 5 years later, and he still remembered that was our deal, and he honored it. And I got the embryo, and so, I felt kind of obligated to, because he had always asked me about him. So if there's ever a time that I want to sell half of him, it'd be to someone like that, that gave me an opportunity.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why we moved forward and went from there.
So when he was a baby, did he go to the Colt Star like untouched, or did he go halter rope?
Well, you got to kind of know my theory on some of that. I don't want them to be dog gentle. I want them to be to where you can handle them if you need to worm them or trim them and that kind of stuff. But or if they get hurt, obviously. But I don't want them to be where you go in the pen, you just got to push them off of you. And he certainly wasn't one of those you had to push off of you. But no, he was a little wild man when he was a baby. But I think that's what gives him I think that's that's the first signs, I would say, of what makes him special. Just you could tell from early on, just the speed that he had. The things that I liked about him was he was, long necked and, pretty headed and good withered. And, he's, taller at the, he's withered than he is his croup, and just all those things that, I kind of look for in a horse, but particularly a cut horse. But, you could tell he had all those things. It's just a matter of, could they get him trained and how much cow he had? Those are things you can't tell, but he had all the other ingredients. So, I will tell you a funny story about him. I initially dropped him off over there. I gave it a month or so, and I called him. I said, well, how's it going? He said, well, this ain't no son gun. I said, well, I was at. He said, well, the first day that they went to clean the stalls, said they pushed the cart in front of the stall door, and he jumped over the cart out the stall door and down the road he went. So, but that was kind of him. I mean, he was you could lead him. So you're asking about how halter broke it was. You could lead him and all those good things, but he didn't do anything just a little bit, I guess is the best way to describe it. I mean, if he went to get a drink of water, it was all of a sudden 100%. If he went to try to get away from you, it was 100%. But, but I think those little things, I think he does the same thing, on the cow. It's not a little bit, it's 100%. Every move he makes is 100%. And he was that way his whole life.
Yeah. And so this horse goes on and eventually ends up at Chava's as a 2-year-old, of course. And so Chava did a phenomenal job with him. And then, of course, we have him, or you guys have him, not we. You and Charles put him in the 2-year-old cell.
We did, yeah. So we ended up moving to Chava's, and it was like in May. So, and he wasn't real broke. And Chava got him going on the cow. He wasn't even started on the cow in May. So I knew right then that just from the way Chava was talking, that he was doing things that an unbroke horse shouldn't even be doing on a cow. So it's, pretty much just natural for him to, want to turn around like he turned around and all that. But so I thought, well, I need to be paying more attention because, we get busy and it was breeding season and all that stuff. So I started making time to go about every month over to Chava's. And to be honest with you, he'd scare you as to what he was doing. I was afraid that he was doing so much that I was afraid he was going to hurt him. And Chava kept telling me he's not going to hurt himself. He's not going to hurt himself. But I mean, he was just on his hocks, and I knew he wasn't broke yet, So just to watch him was just like something I've never seen before in person. You see good horses come to those sales every year and all that stuff, but the way he was so intense, that cow meant so much to him, and just how electric he was on a cow for one that had 30, 60 days riding on a cow. I mean, it was just like he just knew how to turn around. And that's what Chavo was telling me. He's not going to hurt himself because he knows how to turn around. He said the horses that hurt themselves are the ones that are made to turn around, and their legs are not in position to turn around. He always had his legs it was like he had a year's training on him already. It was just unbelievable. So I started taking, different people that I respected in the horse business over there to make sure I was, not, I can appreciate this analogy, is not reading my own paper.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, I thought I had something special. I thought Charles and I had something special. I was telling Charles about him, and Charles wasn't able to come out and see him, but I was giving him reports. And anyway, I took some people over there that I really respected, and they said the same thing. They said, man, this horse is something else. So anyway, come around to the time to decide if we was going to put him in the futurity sales or not. And we thought, well, we'll try it there. Those horses have been bringing a lot of money, and we don't think that there's one been through there like him. So we put him in the sale. Well, when the video came out, there was a lot of people calling, wanting to go to Chava's, wanting Chava to bring him up to the Coliseum, wanting him to haul him to different places. And the one thing I've learned is you don't want to just haul those young horses everywhere and let 30 people try. So we told Chava right up front, said, look, if they want to come to your house and watch you riding, they're more willing to do, that's fine to do that. But we don't want you hauling him all over the place and letting, 10 people, 20 people try. They're just going to have to take your word for it, come see him. They can come as many times as they want. But, they're going to have to just come and watch him at your house. So anyway, that's what we did. And we may have made some people mad doing that, because I know there were several high profile trainers that wanted Chava to bring him to their place and let them ride him, try him there, whatever. But we just didn't want to do that to him. And partly because he was so great too, So there was some trainers that several of them went out to Chava's and watched him and loved him and all that. So, Charles and I, we had a decision to make. And so, talking with Charles, we come up with a number. That was a very high number, but we thought we had a very, very special horse too. So, we said, look, this is our number. If he doesn't bring it in the sale, we have the right. I mean, he's worth something to us. So, and a lot of people, criticized. I mean, I saw on social media where
what did he bring at
he brought $1,175,000.
Yeah. And y'all PO'd him at that $1,175,000.
Yeah. But, there was a lot of criticism on social media, people posting what he brought and, couldn't believe that someone would PO him that. But those same people, I don't know if, obviously they didn't see what I saw in him, and that's okay. That's their opinion. But it was Charles and I's, horse to sell or not sell. So we kept it. And from there, we kept coming with a trainer now that we didn't sell him. So I have been watching Kenny's horses for the last 2 or 3 fraternities. And I've even talked to Ty about it. I mean, even though they might not have been bred as good as everybody else's, those horses were trained. And I mean, Kenny would go do a just amazing job. I mean, I have a lot of respect for that guy. And, not just on the back of a horse. And, can't say that for all of them, but he's just as good a guy off that horse as he is on the back of that horse to me. So, and at the time that I went and was going to talk to him about him, I really didn't know him, but I've learned that part of it, having done business with him. So, my hat's off to that guy. But I called him up and I told him, I said, I got a horse that went to the 2-year-old sale and we PO'd him. And I don't think he really, I mean, he knew who I was. He and I had never talked before that time, but I went to trying to tell him, which horse it was, and called out. I think the lot number was like 65 or something like that. And he said, yeah, he said, I know the horse you're talking about. He said, I watched that video 100 times. And I said, you have? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I'd like to, come visit with you in person about him and, kind of tell you the history on him. He said, yeah. He said, that'd be fine. He told me where he was at. So I went and met him, told him the story on him, as far as the training goes and all that. And it was Becca that told me like a year later, she said that she had saw the video of him and Kenny was already in Fort Worth and she was still at home. And she said, I called Kenny when I saw that horse's 2-year-old video. And she said, I told Kenny, I know we don't have a customer to buy a horse like of this caliber because he's probably going to bring a lot of money. But if someone does come to you and want you to buy a horse, this is the one that I like. And he said, well, it's kind of funny you say that because he's the talk of, he's going to bring a lot of money. He's the talk of the fraternity. So anyway, he was very happy to take him. And so anyway, he took him from the fraternity and he got him home and I gave him, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And I called him and he said, he's everything you said he was. He said, he's phenomenal. He said, but he's not real broke. And he said, we got some work to do, but he said, he's worth putting the time in. So he said, yeah, he's a special horse, I think. So it just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, and Ty, I'll let you speak on this. Don telling you, like, from when he was born, Don was like, I have this Dorish and he's awesome.
Yeah, and Don's been talking about this horse for a long time. And I always paid attention because Don and I talk about all these 2-year-olds and yearlings and stuff and just compare footnotes. And I can't remember if it was the end of his yearling year that he brought him up into the barn because you just had gotten your barn done. Was that correct? Mm-hmm. And he was bouncing off the walls and he was like, this horse just moves different. And so fast forward through his 2-year-old year, then I didn't really get to see him until I guess the videos came out. Don had sent me some videos throughout the, periodically through the year, but I didn't pay much attention to him because I didn't own him.
Yeah.
And, and I had so many of my own that I represented and owned myself. And so we got closer to the sale and the sale video came out. And then I was like, holy smokes. I called Don. I was like, oh, this thing is unbelievable. And then, it was, I can't remember, 2 weeks going into the sale. He told me what he wanted for him. And I said, well, there's no one pulling for you any more than me.
I think those are probably the exact words.
I said, that's awesome. I hope he brings that. And then, obviously I was down there and so they PO'd him and he told me what his plan was, is that he was going to send him up there to Kenny. And I said, yeah. And Don and I have talked about Kenny quite a bit and neither one of us knew him personally at that time. But, you're always scoping out people to send these horses to. You're always, when you do what we do, we're always looking for new people to send these things to. And so, fast forward, I guess we really didn't visit with him anymore until midway through his 3-year-old year. And Don called me. He's like, he's a real deal. He's like, I'm telling you, Kenny likes him. And so, then fast forward to the fraternity and then, the horse had a little tough go there at the fraternity, but I mean, you could tell like it was coming together. It was like the steam was, the merry-go-round had just started turning and it was fixing to get faster. And so what was it? It was through his 4-year-old year that you had called and said, there's a possibility.
Yeah. Well, what, starting with that fraternity, the very first cow, I went and watched him at Don's pre-works over there. It was 2 days over there. It's amazing. Sent Charles the videos from they had a videographer there and sent Charles the videos. He was excited. Kenny was excited. I was excited going into fraternity. The first, and this is how tough this cutting is. I was just talking to a guy the other day about it. There's so many moving parts in this cutting and particularly the cow. And the first cow he cut just was standing there just dead still when he cut him. And all of a sudden just went from 0 to 60 right over there to the herd holder. And he didn't lose a cow. Kenny had to get after it, to head him. And, they didn't back fence him. They didn't lose the cow, but just kind of overshot him a little bit. And he was a little late coming back and they marked him like a 13. But he was early in the, that's one thing about being early I think it was like the first day. So, you're early in the show. I think that the scoring's a little tougher, but anyway, they marked him at 13, took a 13.5 to come back. But, like Kenny and I, hindsight, we talk about it all the time, had they, not docked him so much. I mean, this horse can mark any kind of score. I mean, we all see that now. Kenny felt that way only at the fraternity. I mean, he could have, we legitimately thought we had a finals horse and then just, with a little bit of, things going your way, we had that kind of horse. And for him to take him out of it, just right off the first cow, just a bad cow. And it was kind of let the air out of you. I mean, everybody is, we've had 2 years. We've turned down a bunch of money for him, and we never stopped believing in the horse. I want to make that clear. We never stopped believing in the horse, but the expectations is so high on a horse like that there's a lot of hopes and dreams and a lot of money spent to get to that point, and then to have it taken away just in a blink of an eye with a pencil, But it took a 13.5. We had a 13, so that was it. And, his futurity was cut short, but that wasn't the last show for him. It was the first one, so that's kind of the way we looked at it. We moved on, and so then we come back. He goes and shows him some other places and does really good on him. That horse has probably been reserved by half a point more times than any horse I've ever seen. But took him out to Vegas, did good. Took him to the Cattlemen's, did good on him over there. Brought him back to Super Stakes. Some little silly something happened, like cow ran out of the pen or something. It was just.
I think that's what it was. A cow came up behind him or something.
Yeah,
it ran out. It was something.
Yeah, just something. Like the one cow ran out, and like he was on the other side. One cow ran out and got his cow. Just something silly like that. And so, and that was still in the Will Rogers over there. So then we come back to the Derby, and I think maybe he drew up early and the whole herd left. I mean, it was just something crazy like that all the time in Fort Worth. So I'm starting to think, we're kind of snake bit over here. So then they started the construction on the Will Rogers. They moved it over into John Justin, and we had great luck over there. I mean, the horse has been fabulous. So, the deal with him winning the other night over there, and I've probably told all y'all of this, but, it was a little nerve wracking to me to be back in Will Rogers and having known what I know about that place and just not having very good luck. But for him to do what he did over there, and, the first round, we didn't have a really good go the first round. I mean, the cows weren't very good. I think he marked a 16.5 or something like that the first round, but then he come back and did good the rest of the time. But I thought whenever he marked at 16.5, I said, yeah, we're back in the But no, he's a phenomenal horse, and just he's the kind of horse that I know Ty and Mel and I, we make our living, or for the most part, finding these horses for people like Todd. But this just to and normally I have to sell them. I mean that's just the way it is. I mean, that's the business we're in, and to circumstances just where you have a chance to sell him for a lot of money, didn't believed in that horse just like you would believe in him for somebody else to have bought him. We don't stop believing in them, Todd. Just so we don't stop believing in them after we sell them to you. We still believe in them, or we wouldn't get you to buy them. But just to be able to hold it, hang on to a piece of it, or part of him, 50% of him, is just a dream come true. I mean, it was great to be able to breed him. I had a plan, and it's come full circle. So
you guys talk a lot, every day, and I know probably spring of his 4-year-old year, there started being a little chatter from you, like there might be an opportunity to buy half of him. And I know Ty had brought it up to me a couple of times, and so I'll let you two talk a little bit about how all that came up.
I don't even remember exactly when we started. It was right at the start of his 4-year-old year.
Yeah, right after the futurity, and I told you guys, don't stop believing that horse in me. He's a great horse. He just had some bad luck, whatever. And at that time, Charles wasn't. I mean, he was still good, and we both still believed in the horse. And as it went on, in the Will Rogers, the 4-year-old years is when the most money is won on these cutters. I mean, it just is. So, Charles is of the mindset that, you got to do good that 4-year-old year, and because, the bills are incredible. And so if you don't, if you're not winning and it's an expense, then, whenever you go into your 5 to 6-year-old year, it's harder to win the money on them. The majority of the money is won at the futurity, and then in that 4-year-old class. So that's when the purses are bigger. So as we went along, we had some bad luck, and Charles had some things going on in his personal life and stuff that he thought, well, this horse is valuable, and if you need to raise some funds, well, that's the ones you need to sell. So, he had mentioned it a time or two that maybe he, wanted to sell his part of it. So, when he would, I asked Ty, I said, yeah, I know y'all are doing a lot of stuff, and if you have somebody that might be interested, I believe in this horse, and Ty's like, well, I'll start watching him and this and that. So he watched him a little closer, I think, after knowing that there was a chance that maybe he could buy part of him, and obviously he had seen what we turned down at the futurity for him, so he was paying attention to him, and so finally Ty told me, he said, if Charles is serious about selling his part, he said, just keep me informed, let me know. So I said, well, okay. So I asked Charles, and he's like, well, I don't know. He said, I give him a little longer, whatever. So he did. And there came a day that when he said, hey, and I told him who was interested in it. And he said, if they're interested in, this is what I want for it. So I called Ty, and I think it took about 2 seconds. He said, tell Charles send me his wiring instructions. So
then I had to go back and tell Mel, I don't know where we're going to come up with the money at, or how that we're going to come up with it, but we got to come up with it because I just bought this horse.
And Ty just as usual said, I got a gut feeling about him, because I was just like, Ty, that horse is awesome and he's pretty, and but do we think like he's got it? I hadn't really paid attention to him that close. I'd seen his 2-year-old sell video,
sure,
but we've all seen horses that make amazing 2-year-old sell videos and never do anything else, and I had never really paid any more attention. And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, I'm just telling you, this horse, like when you see him in person, he's made right. He's good-headed, big, pretty eye, and all the things Ty says whenever he loves one, And so he's like, I just got the feeling that Kenny is just that he's right there, and I just think it's coming. And there's nobody, I think we're more excited with the time to be partners than Dawn, because we know what we can do together whenever we got the right horse, And so I think it was really cool that we could start on it and kind of get to experience the explosive growth he had. And it was a little luck on Ty and I's end too, that it was right after we bought him. Then it was like we were coasting and we were winning. I say we, you guys, you and Charles were winning and going along there. But then it was like just a rocket ship. Him and Kenny got together and they were unstoppable after that.
It was like the merry-go-round and it ain't pushing anymore.
Yes.
It was spinning on its own.
Yes.
Yeah. And Kenny, I'll say this about him is, and kind of what, fueled me too is that, Kenny would just, would have bad luck and man, it hurt him just as bad as it did anybody else, he wanted to do good. He knew he had a good horse and so, whenever things wouldn't go right, it was, it did something to him too. So, he had all the, the intentions of that horse doing good. He just, it's just tough. This cutting is tough and I knew that. So I saw an interview with Kenny, and he was talking about, whenever bad things would happen, he'd get a text from me, and that's right. I texted him just because I knew he did everything he could do, and I knew he loved that horse, and I didn't want him to feel. It's about like you're on the Cowboys, and you don't want to beat your quarterback up and then put him out there to go try to win the game for you. You want that guy to be, whether he's doing good or not, you want him to think he can do it.
Yeah.
And that's and I knew Kenny could do it. I had all the faith in the world in him, and the horse is trained, and he'd done his job, and we just needed some things to go our way, and finally they started to kind of turn and started and had let up. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's been 4 shows and he's won 3 of them this year. So
yes.
that's pretty hard to do. And he made the finals at the other one, just didn't have great details in the finals. But and
I'll tell you another great thing too is Charles gave us the opportunity to buy that horse, but then Charles sent all his mares up here to Dawn and bred every one of them to him.
Yeah.
So you can't find a better person to sell you a horse and then believe in the horse still after he sells it.
Absolutely. Yeah. He bred every one of those mares. He's got a string of really.
And then bought some embryos that are out of the best mares in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Out of them. So nobody, I shouldn't say nobody believes in him more, because I think all 4 of us at this table believe in him just as much as Charles does. But it is cool to get a horse from somebody and then them want to stay on that ride with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Charles has never wavered. It's just, you know, and it's expensive, you know, and he's been a huge supporter of this horse. I've got colts over there look phenomenal by all of his. He's got a group of mares.
He's got
over
an
there.
exceptional set of mares.
He's got a great group of mares and those babies out of them, and he exited them, and he's got 3 or 4 colts out of every one of those good mares he's got.
Yeah.
And he's doing the same thing this year. So he still believes in the horse 100%, even though he doesn't own part of him anymore. But he still believes in him. So he's just excited whenever he wins, as we are.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And he's invested in him still, which is cool. And so then we get into his 5-year-old year, and so we're partners. Ty and I are partners with Dawn on him, and we're all having a ball. It's always fun when your horse wins. We were co-champ a couple times, but we're still excited.
It makes it easier.
Yeah, it does.
I'll tell you what, just making the finals down there is a big deal. No one understands how big a deal that is and how much pressure those guys go through, and just having the cows that have to line up the day. I mean, the cow gods got to line up that day.
Yeah.
And just for that horse to have that much success after we bought him, I mean, that's something that doesn't happen.
No, I don't know if I told Ty the other day, I was like, I don't know if we're ever going to want to own another cutting horse again. I don't know if we'll ever have this much fun consistently. Our expectations are going to be pretty high. And so we start going through his 5-year-old year, and we all call and hustle up and try to get the best mares we can bred to him. And I think we all consecutively get some really good mares booked to him. And then we get with Todd and start talking to Todd and get Todd to breed some of his mares to him. And Todd's scoping us out, and we're scoping Todd out. We're all trying to decide how much we like each other, I think. And so we're going through breeding season, and I think Todd starts asking me or you, what about Shotty? And I'm like, that's a Ty thing. That's a good question for Ty. He bought him. It's his decision. And the first year that you stand a stud, you're not looking to make any money. You're just trying to get the very best mare you can bred to him, hopefully cover some of your incentive costs, get your horse in the best incentives you can. You're just trying to make sure that you're a really good steward of your stallion to set him up for success. So you're still investing in him. And so we go through that first year. And I guess, when did you come in on him?
Just this past year, his end of his 5-year-old.
The end of the 5-year-old, yeah. So we chat about him and we go through him. And anyways, Shotty has a great end of the year and wins the Summer Spectacular along with Spillin' Dangerous. Was there 3 of them? Him, Spillin' Dangerous,
Kittenish,
which what a set of horses to co-champ with. You got to love that. And so anyway, so then Todd comes in, and Todd brings a unique set of mares too that he can breed to him. And so, for us 3, I think it was like, of course, our goal and at some point is to try to monetize a horse somehow, whether it's stallion fees or you sell them or whatever it is. But in the beginning like this, I think we were all in the mindset we didn't want to bring on a partner unless we felt like they brought something to the table besides just buying part of your horse, and Todd brought a really, really good set of mares, and obviously just keeps improving on them. Has an exceptional set of mares that Kenny's riding and Taryn's riding. I mean, you've got mares everywhere right now. And so I'll let you talk a little bit about that, Todd, and kind of what attracted you to this horse. And
oh yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think as usual, late to arrive, but grateful to be here, kind of thing. And going back, nobody knew when he was 2 years old that I would ever be part of it, but you should have. When he jumped over the car out of the stall and ran down the road. If anybody who's ever trained a horse that had anything to do with me would say he could probably fit Todd. And I think for us, we're in a breeding program, we're micro focused on who to breed to, who looks like someone, who looks like the horse you want to cross on your mares. And me, I was watching everything I could watch, and saw him son come on during his 4-year-old year, but really his 5-year-old year. And we would talk, breed seed, and listen back what you were saying. We had to know each other. And so my talking points were always something along the lines of, okay, we got something in the sale or something, we're buying a mare or something. How do we do on that with Melanie or with Ty? What do I need to do with this or that thing? And then the very last thing would be, okay, what about Shotty? And it might as well have been a Post-it note, because we're, watching him work. I mean, it's obvious to those of us who love him, you watch him work, and whether it's in the go around or the finals, he, like you say, he just cares a lot about the cow. He's got the athletic ability to do what he wants to do. And he's just different. I mean, he just has an expression about it. And so Matt Williams, who works with me and runs our farm back home, was just as in level as I was. So the other part of that talking point about every other day would be, have you asked about Shotty?
It was fun.
I got a good time. I was asking.
So Todd was gone. Matt came up here to the ranch to ride with me to the Teton sale. And so we're riding down there and we're visiting about the, horses and stuff like that. And he's asking me, because we're headed down there to try to buy third edge, or at least hope that we have enough money to buy him. And Todd was gone. You were on a guy's trip or something.
Yeah.
And so fast forward through, third edges, we bring him home and he calls me and he says, well, you now know what some of these horses he prays for and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I didn't think I would have to give that much. And I was still trying to figure out how to pay for him. And so that's when we kept visiting about Shotty. And then all of a sudden, Todd's like, I'm ready. I'm ready to be in on this horse.
Yeah.
And so the other cool thing is Todd not only has a great set of mares, but he's gone out and traded these people for embryos and stuff. And that just shows how much he believes in it, because he's hustling on the street just like we are. And that's what brings this dynamic to the table is we're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all trying to make this horse the best one that he can be.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say, that first cow, took his, because, the public puts so much emphasis on what happens at that futurity. If a factionally bred stud wins that futurity, that carries a lot of weight. And, that didn't happen for him. But I can also tell you, between everybody sitting at this table, he's bred the kind of mares that any horse that's ever won that futurity would love to have bred. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's who's who of the cutting horse industry that he's got colts coming. They're either on the ground or coming. So, whenever I saw the stud report or whatever, and just the embryos that Charles bought, and I was just over at Billy Wolf's the other day and saw the one out of Showbiz Kitty. It's phenomenal, and but that's Charles bought an embryo out of Blackish and one out of Special New Baby. Mm-hmm. So in Todd, he's got great mares, so it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. I think it's cool. Like I said, it's neat when you have one person that's behind a horse, right? But I think we all four bring very unique relationships, dynamics, strengths to this horse that is a really cool team behind him. And then you put somebody like Charles that I still feel like is a part of our team.
Absolutely.
That is putting the mare power, and eventually it's going to go from mare power to the training dollars it takes to train these if we don't buy some of them ourselves from him, or sell some to our customers. But that's one cool thing about Charles too, is he doesn't sell a lot of his yearlings. He raises them and he goes the way and he puts them with the right people. And so I think I'm just as excited about that, to know that Charles has the set of babies he's had come in, and we do, and Todd does, and we know we're all going to be able to handpick those. So not only do we get to get them out of the right mares, but then they're all going to stay kind of within our circle to be placed with the correct 2-year-old trainers, and then be placed, whether it's in the sale or with the correct maturity guys.
Yeah. Well, then, that was one thing that I had in mind. I've been in this breeding business for 30 plus years, and particularly the cutters, to start out with, at a breeding farm where we had pleasure horses and cutters there too. And it didn't take me long to figure out, and I like to cut, foals better than the pleasure horse foals. So that's kind of the direction I went. So been blessed to work with the best in the industry. But if this horse is bred as good a group of mares as any horse I've ever been around.
Well, I think that the cool thing that makes him really unique too is just like Todd on your mares. I don't think you have a lot of mares, different mares, and I don't think there's one we can't breed to him.
No,
which we have to pick and choose almost every other stud. We just start getting too close, and that's one really cool thing about this horse is we can go.
I never stop with thing. I may ask you guys how you think he'll pass on this mare or something, but whether I'm able to breed or not, I think we need to try one out of him on the mare, whichever one it is, and on the ones that we trade for too. Really nice mares. I mean, breed all of them.
Yeah.
Well, that was the nice thing about him is, when you look back, what horse has bred the most mares in the last 30 years? It's the cat bloodlines, highbrow cat and the Utalic cat and, the highbrow CDs and the Stevie Ray Bonds and the Rebels and Smoothie Cats and it's going to be Third Edge, coming next. So he can breed. He's the obvious outcross for all those because he doesn't have any of that in there. And you look at some other studs that they're breeding some of those mares too. It's because they're forced to. I've got a foal of my own at the house that is a Rebel out of a highbrow CD mare. I mean, she's negative everything, but that's what you're forcing. That we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner because we didn't have the special horse until him. I think the one that they want to ride one that's like him.
And he does that. He takes it to another level because it's like if you're racing a mare or buying a breed mare, there are a lot of breed mares out there where, when somebody sold to you, they said, well, you could breed her to anything. And my question is always, yeah, but should you? What does she bring to the table? And in his case, I'm sure there's some stallions, I guess, that you can breed to, but he's one you look at, yes, you can breed to him, and you watch him in the show pen, and you hear about how he trained, you're like, yes, you should breed to him too. Like he is bringing something to any cross that's going to have his strengths, I guess is what I'm trying to say. See a lot of them work in the pen, and you can breed to him, but he's just so exceptional to me, and such a one-of-a-kind horse. Who would want to breed to him? And then you cross all these great mares on him, and anybody else who would sign up would have to think anything that I breed is going to have a lot more value because we're putting all this value out there in the market of really good horses coming in. So it's pretty easy.
Yeah, and I think when we think of like these highbrow cat, metallic cat mares and all of that, it just happens to be that I think a lot of the things that they need some improvement on when you're looking at them from a conformational standpoint and a breeder standpoint, Shotty really brings to the table, having a horse that runs uphill and good wither and not that there's not a lot of Stevie and metallic and cat mares that are, but there's some of them that get a little metal withered, and this is where I think this horse can really help clean them up. And I think one thing that he brings to the table for those horses is, we've always seen those, they're so easy to train and they're great cutting horses, but this horse, I think, will bring some of that electricity back to him.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think he can really bring some of that, because it doesn't just take a really trained horse now. It doesn't just take a good horse. It takes an electric horse to win.
Yeah, I think, and like you say, any horse that, consistently makes the finals, which there's a lot of them, there's got to be something ultimately that sets them apart. Otherwise, the judges would just mark them all the same score, and the cattle will take care of a lot of that. But at the same time, this horse has, I don't know, I call it a presence or intensity on the cow. That cow means so much to him, but he's not, and he's also really, really fast. If you watch his runs, he is really fast, but he's not just moving to be moving. He's able to beat a cow with his speed, but he's also thinking about that cow through that turn. He's not just, a lot of horses, not a lot, but there's some horses in the past that have had that athletic ability, but they didn't have that same cow that he's got, to where they were just moving big, but they didn't really know where they were going. They're just moving big. But I think he's a special horse, and he brings a lot to the table when it comes from the athletic standpoint, just a speed, which you got to have, and then just the intelligence on the cow is something very, very special.
And we have to give a lot of credit to Kenny for that too, because when you have a horse that loves it that much, it takes the right horse trainer to make sure that they keep that love in them and they don't work it out of them or, try to change their style too much. Like, I feel like Kenny's done a really good job of just letting that horse be great at what he's great at and trying to not overtrain him, not overdo him, And so I'm sure there's been lots of great horses out there that just weren't with the right fit and did get overtrained, and but that horse has been able to shine under him, and we owe him a lot of credit, and Chava, for just letting that horse be as electric and cool as he is and not trying to train him to be too mechanical or too.
Yeah, I think that it's I think there's a fine line between being good and great, and I think it just as easily went the other way. had he not been with those guys.
It wouldn't matter if I owned him or not. That horse is a generational horse, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If I didn't own the hair on him, I would tell the same owner. I would say that's a generational horse. Like he's different. Yeah.
I know we're all looking forward to the rest of the year. We got a Hall of Fame horse now, which that's pretty exciting. And I couldn't think of a better group to achieve that with. It's just going to be fun to get those awards next year. And really, it's just about the horse for me. Like, I just am proud of the horse, and I just think he deserves it. And I don't know if I've ever been in a spot where we've got to own a horse where I'm just like the other night, I was like, it's cool, and we're proud for all three of our brands to have won that. But I'm more proud that the horse won it because he deserved it. He deserved his own championship there. So exciting times ahead for anybody that's listening in here that is interested in breeding to Shotty. His frozen semen contracts are booked full this year, but we do have ICSI contracts. So you can call into our office to get information about those. We don't charge anything up front to ICSI. So kind of our thing here at Solo is we want to take that ride with you guys. If you have a mare that you want to try on him, you send a contract in, you go ahead, ICSI him, and whenever your recip is 45 days in fold and you pay your breeding fee, you still have a live foal guarantee, but it just kind of gives you the financial freedom to try and ICSI those mares. And so our stallion office is happy to talk to anybody about that. If you guys see any of us around, we would love to talk to you about this horse. I think we're all equally passionate about him, tell you guys about all the great mares he's bred, and we're looking forward. We've got a first foal crop on the ground now, so next year will be a second year, and so it will be long. We'll be starting all those. Thank you guys for coming on today. I hope everybody enjoyed the story of Shotty, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.